This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
UN Security Council extends AMISOM mandate in Somalia by 1 year but reduces troops. UN Habitat Assembly wraps up in Nairobi on a high note as nations pledge funds for programs. And man shoots 12 co-workers dead in an office building in the US state of Virginia. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. Beijing to establish a list of unreliable foreign entities as trade war with the United States continues. And in sports, Esperance retain CAF Champions League crown amidst controversy. The United Nations Security Council on Friday decided to reduce uniformed personnel of the African Union mission in Somalia by 1,000. Resolution 2472, unanimously adopted by the UNSC, decided to reduce AMISOM personnel to a maximum level of 19,626 by the end of February 2020. That's in line with the transition plan. The Council decided to authorise AU member states to maintain the deployment of AMISOM until May the 31st, 2020. Under the 2017 transition plan agreed, AMISOM will gradually hand over security to Somali forces, but the African Union has expressed its concern about the extra responsibility as Somalia is scheduled to have elections next year. The UN is making efforts to reinforce stability in Somalia, where Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab fighters have been seeking to overthrow the government.
We are cognizant that AMISOM cannot stay in Somalia forever, and it's necessary to transition responsibilities from AMISOM to the Somali security forces. We are committed to the transitional plan, which will enable AMISOM's brave men and women to leave a noble legacy of a successful deployment in Somalia. However, Somalia stands at a critical juncture as we are approaching one-person, one-vote elections in 2020-2021. We are focused on ensuring a secure, transparent, and credible process that is embraced by our people and marks another important step in consolidating democracy and the rule of law in the country. Therefore, any planned drawdown must be done after thoroughly assessing the conditions on the ground.
Somali traders and locals have been urged to assist police in thwarting potential terrorist attacks. This comes ahead of the Muslim holiday of Eid that's due to be celebrated next week. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello reports now from Mogadishu.
Police in Somalia have beefed up surveillance as the fasting period of Ramadan comes to an end. Security officials say the objective is to ensure militant group Al-Shabaab is not able to target populated markets as thousands of Somalis flock high-end malls and shopping centers to shop ahead of Eid festivities. Next week, Muslims in Somalia will celebrate Eid, a religious festival that takes place after a month-long fasting period. It is also a time for people to celebrate with friends and loved ones.
We call on traders and business owners to increase surveillance at their places of work and ensure vehicles are not left unattended or parked. Businesses must allocate several individuals to monitor movement of traffic near business centers and make sure no vehicles is placed near them. Police will also seize any vehicles found unattended or parked in public areas.
Militant group Al-Shabaab has in recent months stepped up attacks, including deadly car bombs, targeting government installations and security checkpoints in the city and beyond. The group killed 11 people, among them a former government minister earlier this month, in a deadly car bomb at a security checkpoint in the city, one of the deadliest attacks in recent months. Traders have been urged to ensure that vehicles are thoroughly checked to ensure civilians are not targeted by the militant group. In February, a car bomb outside a popular mall killed a dozen people in Mogadishu's Hamarweyne district.
We also appeal to members of the public to refrain from congregating in same places and to limit shopping hours. We also advise parents and children to keep off from main roads during shopping, and to report to the police of any suspicious activities around shopping malls.
A hotline number has also been provided for anonymous tip-offs to thwart potential attacks.
Of particular interest to police will be this street known as Makkah al-Mukarramah, where most of the attacks have taken place here in recent years. Most of the shopping malls in the city are located along the strategic road, and securing it will prove challenging to local authorities now that the business community is hoping to capitalize on the upcoming festivities. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Saudi Arabia's King Salman has warned that terrorist attacks in the Gulf region could imperil global oil supplies. He's seeking support among Islamic countries against arch-rival Iran. The king was speaking at the meeting of the 57-member Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Just before the start of the summit, the king posted a tweet saying he vowed to confront aggressive threats and subversive activities. The world's top oil exporter has ratcheted up tensions with Iran after 4 vessels, 2 of them Saudi oil tankers, were damaged in attacks, and twin Yemeni rebel drone attacks shut down a key Saudi oil pipeline. Tehran has strongly denied involvement in any of the attacks. Chinese President Xi Jinping on Friday sent a congratulatory message on the opening of the 14th summit of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in the Saudi city of Mecca. Xi said that the OIC is a symbol of unity for Islamic countries, and he much appreciates the contributions the OIC has made in promoting cooperation among Islamic countries since its establishment 50 years ago. He said China and Islamic countries have enjoyed traditionally friendly ties, deep friendship, and looks to the OIC as an important bridge for cooperation between China and the Islamic world. He also emphasized that China stands ready to work with Islamic countries to enhance political mutual trust and to promote practical cooperation and dialogue among civilizations. Well, on the phone now we have CGTN's Adel El Marouhi, who is in Mecca for us, keeping tabs on the summits, and now joins us. Adel, strong stance there on Iran and the Gulf tensions, but leaders have also held tight to Palestinian rights over its 1967 border. How does that affect the White House's proposed deal of the century?
Well, the leaks from the White House or have been coming out about the deal of the century basically refer to giving up some territories, many actually territories of the 1967 border, where Israel has, according to international law, illegally built up settlements there, with holding up tight to these territories by the 56 members of the OIC. That's a strong movement. It will definitely have its implication on further disapproving such a deal if it comes to the light in such a way in the United Nations. Earlier and during the summit itself, the Turkish foreign minister has said that any deal, referring to the deal of the century, any deal that would have any solution beyond the 1967 borders and East Jerusalem as a capital will be rejected by the entire OIC community. And that's a strong statement just referring to that Trump's vision, if it will not include these 2 main conditions by the Arabs and the Islamic world, then there will be a complete rejection. That puts quite an embarrassment and pressure over Washington, D.C., which is planning to hold a major economic conference by the end of the month in Bahrain to raise funds for developing the Palestinian territories that will be declared as part of the state of Palestine, and that's where and when he was going to announce the details of the deal of the century. So how the implications of such a notion from the Islamic world will definitely, or at least should, make Washington reconsider.
And Adel, have Islamic leaders reached any tangible decisions to enhance their cooperation?
Well, they've stressed on the necessity of actual cooperation on the ground in all fields. whether when it comes to security, counterterrorism, development, and even international lobbying in international organizations for conflicts and causes that affect the Islamic world. But when it comes to actual interpretation of these supported and widely celebrated statements, there hasn't been any significant step or any physical announcement, for example, a change in the charter of the OIC that would make its resolutions binding or anything of such a notion. So it remains more of a hope and more of a declaration of a content from the Arab and Islamic world that they will work together on common challenges and threats and resolve their conflicts. But the platform of which or through which this can happen has not been established, and there isn't any indications that there will be anyone soon.
And finally, Adel, African, Arab and Islamic states have also been taking part in the summits. What's the latest from these summits, especially on the conflicts in Libya and Sudan?
Well, about half of the 56 members of the the OIC are African countries. And Africa takes a lot of attention for its domestic or continental conflicts during the talks of the OIC, especially behind closed doors. For Sudan and Libya, the representation of which has been quite a controversy before the summit began. The Gulf, Saudi Arabia, UAE, along with Egypt, have been supporting Khalifa Haftar in Libya, the rival of Saeed al-Sarraj, the head of the government national accord, and according to international law and recognition by the United Nations, is the person to represent Libya in that regard. Saeed al-Sarraj has actually attended and sat on Libya's seat to represent with his government Libya's interests in that side. The most controversial side of the representation was, of course, Sudan, where Abdel Fattah al-Burhan appears for the first time in civilian wardrobe, appearing sort of as like a civilian president or a head of state of Sudan to represent his country during that time. It has irritated Sudanese protesters here in Mecca and also back at home. While he was walking in the streets right by the Holy Mosque in Mecca, some protesters stressed that they want a civilian state and an indication that they might not accept him to become a leader of that nation. And at the same time, Burhan himself insisted that he's going to hand over the power within about 3 years to a civilian leadership. So it's still a matter of mistrust between the civilian side in Sudan and the military council, which has been reflected and was quite evident during the OIE summit.
Okay, thank you very much. That was CGTN's Adel El Marhouhi there in Mecca following the summits there. Well, we are now going to return to our story on the United Nations having extended AMISOM's mandate in Somalia, but they have reduced the African Union mission in the country. So we are now joined by Abdulaziz Bilo, who is in Mogadishu for us. Abdulaziz, how is this development likely to be received in Mogadishu?
Well, Karen, this is a much welcomed news for Somalia here, especially at a time when the Somali government still is ensuring that security sector reforms remain a key priority. So the fact that the United Nations did have a special sitting yesterday to deliberate on the extension of AMISOM's mandate, the Somali government here sees that as a positive step forward and one that shows the international community is still on track to ensure that security sector reforms is achieved here in Somalia. And Al-Shabaab, the militant group, is not given a window of opportunity to be able to expand its activities or expand its areas of operation. So for now, the Somali government welcomes this move and sees it as one that is aimed at strengthening the country's security sector reforms, Karen.
Well, the African Union has expressed concerns about the reduction of the AMISOM troops, and also there's more responsibility for Somalia forces, and that may be a little bit too much at this time. What has the Somalian government been saying about the presence of AMISOM forces?
Well, Karen, since last year when the UN started doing the drawdown of African Union troops here in Somalia, the Somali government has been insisting that the time is not right for the drawdown. But on the other end, Somalia wants to see tangible progress also on the Somali security sector reform. So any drawdown by AMISOM troops should also be met by a similar situation here on the ground. That is an increase in the number of Somali security personnel, or also the equipping and the training of Somali forces. So the Somali government says that the time is not yet right for AMISOM to vacate Somalia, but it sees that AMISOM as a force that has been able to establish a position to replace the AMISOM forces who have left. Now already 1,000 have left, and another 1,000 are supposed to leave by February next year. So Somali government wants to ensure that the international community supports Mogadishu in an effort to create additional forces to take control of these areas where African Union forces have vacated. Karen.
And Abdulaziz, let's talk about Al-Shabaab activity there. How is the reduction of AMISOM troops likely to impact on the war on terror?
Well, let's talk about Middle Shabelle region, especially that is in close proximity to Mogadishu. Regional authorities there have been against the reduction of AMISOM troops because Burundian troops who vacated the Middle Shabelle region were very vital in securing that region of the country from Al-Shabaab. It is also the same region that is used to protect Mogadishu from deadly militant attacks. So the vacation of Burundian troops from Middle Shabelle dealt a major blow in terms of security, allowing Al-Shabaab to retake and capture major towns that were captured almost 6-7 years ago by Somali forces and African Union troops. So it's a big setback for regional authorities who still want Somali forces to be able to be strengthened so that they can be able to replace African Union troops here on the ground. But in terms of securing these regions, the Somali government insists that Somali forces backed by African Union troops need to take the fight to the militants' doorstep so that Al-Shabaab doesn't have enough opportunity to be able to capture new territory and new environment and threaten again the Somali security.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. That was Abdulaziz Bilo. Virginia Beach in Virginia say a long-serving public utility employee opened fire on co-workers at a city office building. 12 victims have been killed, 5 others have been wounded. Police say the gunman went from floor to floor, shooting indiscriminately. One police officer was among the wounded, but was saved by his bulletproof vest. The police returned fire and the shooter also died. The gunman's motive is not yet clear. Police have found a semi-automatic pistol and a rifle at the scene. The attack has left city employees shaken.
Due to the sound of gunfire, they were able to locate the floor in which the suspect was committing his carnage. They immediately engaged with the suspect, and I can tell you that it was a long gun battle between those 4 officers and that suspect.
We just heard that there was an active shooter, and we just barricaded ourselves in offices to make sure that we were all just ran in our office and closed the door.
It's because it's just entirely too much killing going on.
We are going to a short break. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including World Health Organization says tobacco kills 1 person every 4 seconds. And what life is like in Egypt during the days of Ramadan.
For lucrative economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
From Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. find your voice.
World No Tobacco Day was celebrated on the 31st of May. Well, according to the World Health Organization, tobacco kills one person every 4 seconds. This year's theme is Don't Let Tobacco Take Your Breath Away. The annual campaign is an opportunity to raise awareness on the harmful and the deadly effects of tobacco use. Let's now hear from a medical officer from the WHO.
The scale of the global tobacco epidemic is immense. 8 million people die each year because of tobacco, and this represents 15% of all deaths worldwide. And also another shocking number is that out of these 8 million people that die each year because of tobacco, 1 million people die because of exposure to secondhand smoke. There are a lot of measures that countries can adopt so that less people die of tobacco use. For example, creating 100% complete smoke-free environments everywhere, not having children grow up with being bombarded by tobacco advertising every day, informing the public about the dangers of tobacco.
In South Africa, World No Tobacco Day was celebrated with a special emphasis on looking after children's lungs. The Western Cape's No Tobacco Task Team are working with early childhood development experts to help people quit smoking. CGTN's Travis Andrews has this report.
With 7 million smokers in the country, South Africa has a tobacco issue, which is not only leading to early deaths, but is a serious public health crisis, where children are becoming the victims. That's according to the Western Cape's No Tobacco Task Team, who say the problem is being compounded by issues such as most smokers being women and most being from the Western Cape. And studies being presented show that the young ones are not safe from tobacco even at birth.
Newborn babies and young children had nicotine in their bloodstream. So that tells you the power of air pollution, or what we call passive smoking or environmental tobacco smoking. And the long-term effect of that is it affects what we call cognitive development of the child. So what eventually happens is the child's capabilities at school is not maximized as a child who's, as compared to a child who's not grown up.
And it's for this reason that the government has legislation in place banning smoking in public spaces, making it illegal to smoke indoors, and smokers must puff at least 10 meters away from a building. But no tobacco advocates say that hasn't stopped errant mothers from lighting up, which also exposes children to disease.
One of the causes of TB is tobacco smoking. So studies have been proven that children that are exposed to second-hand smoking, that is like passive smoking, if parents are smoking in the house and they are exposed to parents being TB positive, their rates are high to contract TB.
Studies have shown that along with tobacco products, electronic devices that mimic cigarettes have poisonous substances and nicotine, which have made both equal targets for no tobacco advocates. The government's on tobacco also includes an electronic delivery systems bill, which if passed could see vaping banned in public spaces by the end of June.
At this point in time around the country, including in the Western Cape, we are trying to support the electronic devices bill. If that passes through in June, it means that that will also become illegal to smoke and expose other people to it.
For now, though, it remains to be seen whether legislation and education is enough to bring this public health issue further into the national discourse. But what is clear is that the health of children's lungs has become a galvanizing issue for many that aim to highlight tobacco's dangers. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Still in South Africa, the National Defence Force has been commemorating the International Day of UN Peacekeepers in Bloemfontein. Men and women in uniform lined up in honour of their fallen colleagues. The event included a wreath-laying ceremony for military personnel and family members to honour those who have lost their lives. CGTN's Yulisa and Jamela has more.
The United Nations Peacekeepers Day is set aside to honor and pay tribute to the soldiers who died on duty while on peacekeeping mission flags. South Africa joined the rest of the world in commemorating this day. 55 South African soldiers lost their lives between 2003 and 2017 in various countries while on U.S. peacekeeping duties. The chief of the South African National Defence Force, or SANDF, General Solishoke, says those who sacrificed themselves while protecting the continent died with honor.
To ensure that there's peace in our continent, so that our people can be able to live in peace. Because we believe that the South Africa, if there's no peace in our region, we'll never enjoy peace. It is for that reason that we are part of the international community in search of peace, particularly in our African continent, while the United Nations is striving to ensure that there's peace in the world.
The United Nations praised South Africa for its role in peacekeeping missions on the African continent.
This year, we mark this day under the theme Protecting Civilians, Protecting Peace, chosen to mark the 20th anniversary of the first time that the Security Council explicitly mandated a peacekeeping mission to protect civilians.
The event was attended by the families of the late soldiers.
It's showing that regardless of what happened, that they left, they passed on, they were their people, and they were their heroes, as they are our heroes, and they will forever be remembered. And for that, this will be something that our kids will grow with, and they will know that their father fought for this country and worked hard for this country, and SNDF made sure that the memories will always be there.
SANDF says it will continue to remember and honor the soldiers who made the ultimate sacrifice while serving on peacekeeping and peace support missions. Yulisan Jamela for CGTN, Bloemfontein, South Africa.
To Kenya now, and the first ever UN Habitat Assembly has ended on a high note. It follows a successful funds pledge for their programs and the election of a new president and executive board. 6 resolutions were adopted at a plenary session during the closing ceremony. CGTN's Robert Nagila now reports.
After 5 days of discussions at the first ever UN Habitat Assembly, an agreement was reached on 6 draft resolutions.
Do I take it that we adopt all the draft resolutions referred to by consensus? I hear no objection. It is so decided.
Among the resolutions passed were the UN program for 2020 to 2023, capacity building for the new urban agenda, and achieving gender equality. More than 20 countries, among them China and Kenya, pledged funds for the UN Habitat's urban dimensions of sustainable development goals.
UN Habitat is encouraged by the positive outcome of the Partnership and Pledging Conference. $152 million was pledged by 21 countries.
On Monday, Marfa Delgado was elected as the first ever president of the Assembly after the UN Habitat was elevated from a governing council to an assembly.
This presidency is the most recent among the UN system, and after 14 years of the UN reform, we are creating a new governance body. So this week we have been working very hard in order to establish our executive board.
The Russian city of Ekaterinburg was chosen as the host city for this year's World Cities Day at the end of October. More than 3,000 delegates, including heads of state and ministers, attended the assembly. The next UN Habitat Assembly will take place in 2023 in Nairobi. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
For Muslims, the holy month of Ramadan is one of abstaining from food and drink throughout the day, as well as more prayers than usual. In Egypt, it's about more than just fasting and praying. Egyptians completely changed their normal routine and daily habits during this special month in the Muslim calendar. CGTN's Yasser Hakim brings us a day in the life of Cairo's inhabitants.
It's a shorter working day during Ramadan, as office hours are reduced by half. And because of the summer heat, there are less people in the streets during the day. At around 14 GMT, the streets get jammed as it's the end of the office hours and Egyptians rush back to get the food ready for iftar or breaking the fast. It's a common practice that friends, relatives and colleagues gather for iftar instead of eating alone. At around 1640 GMT, the cannon goes off to announce that Muslims can now eat. The iftar in itself is a fun occasion where people make use of it to reunite and meet up with old friends.
Ramadan is very beautiful. It's an occasion that brings happiness to everyone. Even the needy look forward to it because of the extensive charity work during Ramadan.
After iftar, Egyptians flock to the streets. The good weather encourages some to go shopping or just strolling around. Others gather in cafes and restaurants to enjoy the company.
Ramadan brings people closer. Friends who haven't met for a long time get together and enjoy themselves. As you can see, the streets and shops are busy with people.
It's a festive mood, with cultural music and traditional dance in the midst of the Ramadan decoration and lights.
Every year, Ramadan is more fun than the year before. There are special places to go and celebrate, like Al-Azhar, Al-Hussein, and the old mosques. Anywhere is a lot of fun during this month.
And this goes on until sunrise, when fasting is resumed and a new day begins. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
We've got all the business news for you coming up after the break, including Beijing to establish a list of unreliable foreign entities as trade war with the United States continues. And Tanzania authorities say there is no turning back as the ban on plastic bags takes effect.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
We come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
More on the ongoing trade tensions between China and the United States. New Chinese tariff increases on $60 billion worth of US goods came into effect today. This comes after Washington's decision to increase duties on $300 billion worth of Chinese goods. But Beijing may have a new weapon in their trade arsenal, a list of unreliable entities. CGTN's Yo Yang has more.
More than 5,000 tax items,
with the tariffs ranging from 5 to 25%. Beijing is ramping up the pressure on the number of imports from the U.S.
We will have to take necessary countermeasures to the additional tariffs imposed on some Chinese goods by the U.S. To borrow the words of the U.S. side, let's wait and see.
The duties in large part target the American agriculture industry and include products like peanuts, sugar, wheat, and chicken. This follows Washington's decision to raise tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods. The world's two largest economies are in a tug of war.
China never succumbs to external pressure. We have the resolve and ability to defend our lawful and legitimate rights and interests. We hope the U.S. can work with China to meet halfway, address each other's legitimate concerns, and strive for a mutually beneficial agreement on the basis of mutual respect and equality.
Meanwhile, Chinese authorities on Friday announced the country would establish an unreliable entity list. The document will include foreign companies, organizations, and individuals who fail to obey market rules or harm the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese enterprises. The Chinese Commerce Ministry says the move aimed at safeguarding national security in the global multilateral trading system.
Some foreign entities have violated market rules for non-commercial purposes and launched discriminatory measures against Chinese companies. Such moves endanger the legitimate interests of enterprises, harm China's national security, and threaten the global industrial and supply chain. This has also inflicted a negative impact on the global economy, enterprises, and consumers.
The ministry says the list is in accordance with Chinese laws and regulations, including the antitrust law, the foreign trade law, and the national security law. More specifics on what measures will be taken against the firms that find themselves on the list are expected to be announced soon. Yu Yang, CGTN.
Tanzanian authorities say there will be no turning back on the government's decision to ban single-use plastic bags from June the 1st. It's urging shoppers to adopt the change and is encouraging the use of carrier bags made with alternative materials. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
They started as a tool for convenience, but single-use plastic bags have turned into an environmental nightmare. Tanzania's government has had enough, issuing a ban that will see the country totally eliminate single-use plastic from its economy. The minister responsible says the ban will help the country build a new industry, manufacturing environmentally friendly paper bags.
And therefore for Tanzania, this step is very important because our economy, our livelihoods relies on our environment. And relies on our continued beauty as a country.
Changing public behavior is a challenge, but the Nipe Fagio program aims to promote a culture of cleaning and protecting the environment. It was started 7 years ago, and one of its founders says cleaning plastic waste has been their biggest challenge.
Kisutu market, one of our big markets here, in one day they use 18,000 plastic bags in one day. And there are many more markets like Kisutu around Dar, around the country.
For years, environmental protection groups have urged the government to adopt a plastic ban. But industry business groups have often prevailed due to fears of job and tax losses. According to the National Environmental Management Council, plastic bag use started in the 1970s in Tanzania. Now, decades later, these are some of the alternatives to plastic that this generation intends to use. The government is now urging manufacturers to focus on producing alternatives to plastic bags. But environmentalists say not all of these are safe in the long run.
Single-use anything, even, I have to say, single-use brown paper bags, is not environmentally friendly. The amount of processing and water and heat and electricity and everything that goes into producing something for oneself does not make any economic sense.
Worldwide, 127 countries have introduced some sort of plastic bag legislation. Africa has 34 of these countries, followed by Europe with 29. Now Tanzania has joined the fight against a pollution monster of its own creation. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
Meanwhile, Uganda is still finding it hard to enforce a ban on plastics, despite issuing the directive over 10 years ago. According to Uganda's National Environment Management Authority, over 600 tons of plastic are disposed of in the country daily. Now, in a renewed effort, the government has tasked its environmental watchdog to crack down on traders who import illegal plastics into the country. CGTN's Henry Ayesiga reports.
A bag for every customer. Sophie Ahmed says plastic bags are convenient.
Number one, those plastic bags are cheaper for someone to afford at any time, at any place, anywhere. If government cannot find other alternatives, then that business will still continue in Uganda.
Uganda issued a ban on polythene bags that are non-biodegradable in 2007. But not many people, including the traders and their customers, can tell the legally accepted dimension of plastic bags.
We hear different sizes, this type, those qualities, but we're not aware of them. They should teach people which type they want exactly. If they do not do that, still that business will continue in Uganda.
Most plastics are imported from Kenya, while others are locally manufactured. Environmentalists are now concerned that the unregulated plastic business is destroying the ecosystem.
The environment watchdog should not only be a watchdog, it should bite. It should bark and bite. Never do the needful. The destruction of the environment is a destruction of a human race.
Rwanda and Tanzania have all put a total ban on plastics, and offenders are liable to heavy fines if found guilty. While environmentalists are advocating for a total ban on plastics, traders here believe recycling the plastics is the best option because it provides jobs for many people, at the same time saves the environment. And some factories have already begun recycling the plastic waste. But not all is collected. Plastics of all sizes continue to find their way into water reservoirs and agricultural land. Environmentalists believe if regional governments harmonize their laws on plastics, it could help save the environment from pollution. Hilary Yesga, CGTN, Kampala.
South Sudan has resumed oil production in one of its northern oil fields after a 6-year-old conflict damaged oil wells. The newly reopened oil field is projected to add at least 5,000 barrels per day. South Sudan is currently working to resume production in all of its major redundant oil fields as it plans to boost the nation's overall output by 2020. CGTN's Patrick Hoyt now reports.
South Sudan has one of the largest reserves of crude in the East and Central African region, but civil war which began in 2013 ruined many fields and only a third of the country's oil has been explored. A peace agreement signed between President Salva Kiir and opposition groups last September is bringing relative peace, but Juba needs the oil money to run the would-be unity government. It also needs cooperation of Khartoum because the oil flows through Port Sudan, then to the international market.
President Salva has been so concerned about the interruption of the oil production and oil flow, because basically oil is the lifeline of South Sudan. Any interruption, 90% of our budget will be cut.
Juba says it's broke and civil servants have now gone for months without salaries. South Sudan's government says it's increasing oil production in the country to be able to raise the money needed for implementation of the country's peace deal and also for development. However, many here are concerned because prior to the beginning of war in 2013, oil money was coming in, but little was done for development.
We are here also to keep reminding the Honorable Minister about the cry of the people. They are always appealing that while we are concerned about the resumption, we should make sure that all the concerns like issues of environment protection is also considered, issues of services to the people.
South Sudan's oil sector has a number of international players such as China, Malaysia and India. The government of India says it is ready to help build livelihoods for South Sudanese communities living around oil fields.
Government of India is with South Sudan in all the good and bad times. Definitely, Indian government would extend all the support required by South Sudan for its progress and stability and peace.
South Sudan's government says oil production would reach pre-war levels of 350,000 to 400,000 barrels per day by mid-2020. Then it would be in a position to fully fund its budget. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Altor Oilfield, South Sudan.
We're going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including Uganda's filmmakers excited by the potential for Oscar nominations.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, which is the organisation responsible for the Oscars, will now allow Ugandan films to be nominated for the awards. Local filmmakers say this is a huge step for the film industry in Uganda. CGTN's Leonie Sanyanga reports.
Sound?
Lights, camera, action. The makings of a Ugandan film and potentially an Oscar nomination. These productions are now eligible to participate in the world's most prestigious film awards.
There are probably some people who are aware of the quality of work we have, just because we have not been exposed enough.
The decision by the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences marks a turning point for the local film industry. It's productions like these that could be listed in some of Uganda's featured films. But the selection process for which film best fits could be a rigorous one. Films from Uganda will compete in the Best International Feature Film category. The local Oscar Selection Committee has already started its work.
We're going to have to work above and beyond to do more than just a job of selecting or nominating the films, to help and put also structures in place.
There is much anticipation, even for actor Jack Serunkuma, who featured in the Disney production Queen of Katwe.
Okay, still a dream. And I'm sure one day I'll get an Oscar. In which film, I don't know.
But getting to the Oscars will require a lot of work.
Over time, filmmakers have not been doing films in line with what the Oscars want. Yeah. So now it's going to be like another new challenge.
Okay, yeah, action. Local films still struggle to pull crowds to the cinema. It could still be many years before Uganda's best film talent is celebrated in Hollywood. Leon Sanyanga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
The first wild animal to ever undergo cancer treatment in South Africa is now recovering at his home in the Lorry Park Zoo. Chaos, the lion, was diagnosed with skin cancer just over a month ago and now has completed his radiation therapy. CGTN's Julie Shear now reports.
It's not every day that doctors treat wild animals in a South African hospital. But for 16-year-old Chaos the lion, it was the only option once his owners at the Lorry Park Zoo spotted a cancer sore on his snout.
Because it's on his face and on his nose, so because of the cancer, the skin cancer, it can't be cut out, because then we would basically cause a lot of damage to his nose. We could even deform his face, and that could also lead to other problems with breathing and stuff like that. So the only treatment that would work for him would be the radiation. So we chose to do the radiation on his face, and then the lesion on his leg we've removed surgically.
Chaos was treated at the Med Oncology Unit in Pretoria, which has dealt mostly with domesticated animals such as cats and dogs.
We have been treating animals for quite a few years, and we've sort of found out what works, that we don't have to give them 30 treatments or 40 treatments as we do in humans. So in general, we give them 4 treatments, and they tend to tolerate the treatment well, and it works well.
Chaos has responded well to his treatment so far. He's now been sedated and is ready for his last round of radiotherapy.
So we work quickly here, get everything done. He has to be on a drip. He's got to have fluids. That's essential. And we just take this opportunity quickly to treat his wounds, put him on a drip, and also then just to put some fly control and stuff like that on him and just give him a good check over.
This is a medical breakthrough for South Africa, but it may be a long time before it becomes common practice.
It has its limitations, obviously. You know, if the animal is small enough and can be sedated and darted and anesthetized, then one could theoretically treat it. You're not going to get an elephant in the room.
The much-loved lion is one of Laurie Park's first and oldest wild cats and is now on the road to recovery. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
We've got all the sports news coming up for you after the break, including Esperance retain CAF Champions League crown amidst controversy.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Tunisian side Esperance were crowned CAF Champions League winners in controversial circumstances after the second leg against Wydad Casablanca was abandoned in the second half. After a lively opening, one Shabani's charges found the breakthrough 4 minutes before half-time through Youssef Belaili to make it 1-0 on the night and 2-1 on aggregate. The visitors showed sense of urgency after coming out for the second half with Ayman Al-Hassouni missing a clear-cut chance. Drama began just before the hour mark when Wydad thought that they had found the equaliser, but the goal was controversially ruled out for being offside. Play was halted for over an hour as Wydad players refused to continue. The match officials consulted and eventually abandoned the match, handing Esperance the title.
We are the champions without any defeat. It's a record number and a big history. It's a historic 100th birthday for Esperance. We won 2 Champions Leagues in 6 months. It was an abuse for Taraji, an abuse for the Tunisian football, abuse for the CAF. We refused to participate in this abuse. We wanted to play a match, a neutral match. CAF had another point of view. We came from Morocco to play football, but now we don't understand what happens, why they ask us to play. They should decide every year whom the title goes to. We didn't understand. In the first leg, they refused a legitimate goal according to the world.
Former high-profile players, including Italy's Alessandro Del Piero, Portugal's Luis Figo and an ex-Liverpool and Tottenham players, put on a show for UEFA Champions